Good evening, and thank you for tuning in. Once again, you are listening to the Baltimore News Networks and Analysis Program. I'm your host, David L. Johnson, Sr. Welcome aboard. I am pleased to be here to serve as always. It is an honor and a pleasure to take time out of a schedule to stand up for the love and honor of the community, to deal with the many issues that have been of such an intense and or disturbing nature. As Michael Jackson just said, that all he wants to say is that they really don't care about us. And that's something that we're going to have to get through our skulls one way or another. That is the truth. So today's program is dedicated to the community, for those who have suffered under the hands of police brutality, as well as to those who have even decided to switch sides, given the fact that the New World Order is marching headstrong on into its final phase of encroachment upon not just the black community, but the world in its entirety. So we're going to talk tonight a little bit about the police and the power trip. This is part one of a two-part series. I'm going to have some special guests on next week, some victims, some working men who were the victims of police brutality in some of the most worst and disrespectful ways. And despite the emergence of the 21st century and many of the things that are taking place or going on, you would think that many of us have learned our lessons by now, as opposed to continuing to sell out, as opposed to continuing to send misinformation, as opposed to continuing to insult and or slander people, to mix other people in, even with their programs and their dubious lives and all of the wickedness that may be going on in their lives. And I say to you, brother, get your life together. Don't implicate me in any of your foolishness. Yes, I run a half-hour show, and everybody knows who you're talking about when you talk about the half-hour show. Be very careful what you say and what you do, because, see, everybody's not a punk. Some of us will come see you. Take that straight from David Johnson, and I'm not going to say that twice. Family, let's get into this discussion tonight. Again, as I said, we want to talk about police and their power trip. In the midst of this 21st century, the things that are happening now, my research shows that surveys taken by various organizations from around this country demonstrate that an encounter with the police by the average black man in America tends to end usually with him having dealt with some type of rude, racist, demeaning, or otherwise inappropriate conduct. And this is what happens with black men. This particular society cannot face up to a disease that is deeply embedded within its psyche, deeply embedded within its genetic and or psychological makeup. And that disease is racism. Racism, like a cancer, it is incurable and therefore inoperable. You cannot cut it out. You cannot massage it. It has to be killed wholeheartedly. People have to understand that. Hardly anyone from the black community would be shocked by any of this. Headlines in many cities flow with stories of police misconduct, from prostitution scandals to allegations of straight-out corruption. You know the routine: planted evidence, false reports, to that famous, the suspect lunged at the officer's gun. Everybody's familiar with that one. Now, we got to know and understand, this is not just a Baltimore thing, so I want you all out there that are playing sides, that are rolling with the police, that are heavy on the crime and law enforcement thing. We recognize the fact that this is an election season. And being an election season, politicians are running for seats. But by the time this show is over with, and I begin to discuss some things for you, not just on a local level, not just nationally, but to show you that on an international level, America, as it marches slowly toward the emergence of its New World Order, has put in place bits and pieces of its global New World Order that are so magnanimous, and I don't mean that in a sense of great, but are so enormous, so stupendous, so horrendous, so murderous by way of implication, that when this thing is all over with, it will make the Middle Passage look like a day at summer camp for your children. Hear what I say to you, and I don't mix any bones about it. And I know that a lot of you out there that are listeners, you really don't like to hear this type of analysis, or you are afraid of these types of things. But as long as the community continues to finance and support a particular show like this, it makes no difference to me if I have, simply put, a half hour each week in order to get the news out. I'd rather spend one half hour with you getting out some very positive and pertinent news to the community, to the salvation of our souls, to the upliftment of ourselves as a people, rather than be in your ear 5 days a week, living a wicked, unjust, immoral life, and everybody knowing that I'm wicked, unjust, and corrupt, and can do and or say nothing about it. in the same venue that the wickedness of the police departments around the country, we got to understand some things that are taking place. These guys are being paid to do a job. And as the rules change, we have to understand that there's a process of growth and development. These people are fighting for their jobs just like steel workers are fighting for their jobs. These people are fighting for their jobs just like elected officials are fighting to get put back in seats again. And when it comes to money, corruption has no allies. They say that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, I'm telling you that according to my research and the way these different things are going, and I understand that I'm being mixed up in some foolishness and a lot of nonsense that I didn't know anything about, but the more I learn about it and the more the evidence comes into play, people's behavioral patterns, their overall approach to things begins to call them out in specific ways where what they do does demonstrate that exactly what's being said or insinuated about them somehow, some way appears to be true. So then people come off swinging in the dark, mislabeling and misapplying evidence or labeling any and everybody just for sake of swinging in the dark. Well, fool, turn the light on so that you can see whatever it is that you're swinging at. But in this society, as we fight against police brutality, racism, corruption, and all those things, the last thing anybody wants to have to fight against in the 21st century is some Uncle Tom Negro who has decided that for a piece of silver, he's going to turn his butt up in the air and become the neighborhood prostitute. This type of foolishness has to stop. This is what makes the community go out and import all kinds of police into your community and corrupt you and do anything to you that they want to do, planting guns, planting drugs, raiding houses, arresting working people, assaulting everybody. And for some strange reason or another, we seem to not be picking these things up. But you see, this is where the paradox of police power really comes into play, and people have to understand this. In essence, to make it to the force, when you look at and or examine a cadet, one has to be honest, they have to be polite, upbeat, and at least have a positive outlook on life while they're applying for the job. But after a few months or even a couple of years on the job, and that all depends on the personality of the officer that's involved, they sometimes become reckless, rude, highly impulsive, and in many instances, just downright nasty. And this is what brings you police brutality. This is what brings you those shootings. This is what brings you all of those different things that happen in the community that by the time it makes the evening news, a specific segment of the community has been criminalized and pictures have been painted of us in such a way that demonstrates that that's all our community can do is produce crime. But when our babies are in the 4th and 5th grade and they're reading on college levels or they're passing some of the tests with flying colors and doing some of the greatest things that our children can do, that somehow, some way, mysteriously, never makes the evening news. When black men get up at the crack of dawn and go and work from sunrise to sunset and barely are able to pay their bills and have yet never turned to the breaking of any law, somehow, some way, that mysteriously never makes the news. So when I accuse America of being corrupt and the evidence and the research and the data continues to show your politicians are corrupt, they're in on it from pillar to post, then believe it. Your businessmen are corrupt, they're in on it from pillar to post, believe it. The media, they own and control and sponsor the media, so then they're in on it. The preachers, they're buck dancing, they're prostitutes. In fact, the best thing that most of them can do now, remove the podium from the top of the temple and put up a couple poles, flip upside down, put your drawers between the crack of your butt and flip yourselves in and out and let the congregation throw dollars at you because it's the same as a night in a strip club. They're corrupt. They're in it all together. Family, look at it for what it's worth. While Americans are on top of the world as far as power is concerned, you got to understand, fear of losing both their power and the position of being number one can be seen in almost every crevice of society. And a lot of times we see it, but we just don't know what it is exactly that we're looking at. Which is the key reason why today, in the 21st century, our black men and our youth now seem to be the central focal point to be attacked. But family, you got to look at these things for what it is. I want to talk to you about a book called The Twilight of Democracy, The Bush Plan for America. And it's real interesting in there because it points out some things that when you look at this book, again, The Twilight of Democracy, The Bush Plan for America. Some of the things that went back make you look and wonder. As you're marching down the road to fascism. Now, I'm going to read these things to you that are affecting us globally. But shut your eyes and try to visualize where you've seen these things in Baltimore on the local level, because that's what makes it interesting, and that's what helps us to understand the nature of the New World Order as it is encroaching. The only thing that has me baffled now is how is it that seeing all that we see, after all the enslavement, after all of the Willie Lynchism, after all of the Jim Crow era, after all of the enslavement, how can people continue to jump on the bandwagon except the fact that they've studied this New World Order so well and realize that they can't whip it, so the only other alternative that they see is to join it. And I don't care what religion you faking, it's about justice. Justice all across the board for any and everybody. And I want to say to the listening audience, particularly you whites, it's time you get up off of that stench of racism and pay attention to this, because truth be told, they are crushing you too. But you're just not looking at it yet, because all they show you on the evening news is black youth, black men. That's all they continue to show. But truth be told, the political structure that's coming upon the face of this earth makes no bones of distinction as to who it crushes. If any ideology emerges that is counter to what they are expecting, then you can bet your last dollar and walk away a winner that you're going to be crushed. Now, as you're marching down the road to fascism, learn to look for key signs of disdain for the importance of human rights. In any society, when you see that there's no longer a regard for human beings and human rights, you can bet your last dollar you are marching down the road to fascism. Though they keep telling you it's a democratic republic and all that other nonsense that they've duped us with over the last 200 and some odd years. When you look up and see a society identifying key enemies within its own ranking society or scapegoating them for a cause of unification like ABC, NBC, CBS, 2, 11, and 13 are doing in Baltimore. And if they're doing it in Baltimore, they're doing